June 17, 1952, 5:43 a.m. Brooklyn waterfront, Pier 7. Danny Torino was the first to see it. He'd been a longshoreman for 23 years, worked the Brooklyn docks since he was 16, seen plenty of things that made his stomach turn. But nothing like this. Tommy Fingers Mancini was nailed to the wooden wall of the Pier warehouse, not hanging, nailed. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Railroad spikes through his palms and feet, crucifixion style, his head slumped forward, blood dried in streams down the weathered wood beneath him. In his mouth was a handkerchief, and pinned to his chest was a playing card, the ace of spades. Danny dropped his coffee thermos. The sound of it hitting the concrete brought other workers running. Within minutes, a crowd had formed. Nobody touched the body, nobody called the police. Not yet. Because everyone on that pier knew what that ace of spades meant. This wasn't just a murder. This was a message from Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner of Murder Incorporated, the man who controlled every dock, every warehouse, every shipping operation from Red Hook to Sunset Park. By 6:15 a.m., word had reached the 76th Precinct. Detective Frank Costigan arrived at 6:40, his partner Detective Murphy right behind him. They'd been working Brooklyn homicides for 12 years. They'd seen Anastasia's handiwork before. Costigan looked up at Tommy Mancini's body, took in the spikes, the card, the positioning. He turned to Danny Torino. "When did you find him?" "About an hour ago, maybe 5:45. "You know him?" Danny hesitated. "On the Brooklyn waterfront in 1952. You didn't volunteer information to cops. Not if you wanted to keep working. Not if you wanted to keep breathing." "His name's Tommy Mancini. Worked the docks. Good kid. Kept his head down." "Good kids don't end up nailed to warehouse walls," Murphy said. Danny shrugged. "Maybe he wasn't as good as I thought." Costigan walked closer to the body. The medical examiner would confirm it later, but he could already tell Tommy had been dead for at least 6 hours, killed somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. The blood patterns suggested he'd been alive when they nailed him up. The spike through his left palm had been driven in first, then the right, then both feet together with a single massive spike through the ankles. He'd bled out slowly, probably took 20 minutes to die. But it was the handkerchief in his mouth that told Costigan everything he needed to know. He'd seen it once before, 3 years ago, when a truck driver named Paulie Gambini had been found in a similar state in Red Hook. The handkerchief meant one thing. The victim had talked, had given up information, had betrayed someone. "Cut him down," Costigan told the uniformed officers. "Get the body to the morgue, and someone call the harbor squad. I want to know what ships came through this pier in the last 48 hours. Murphy pulled Costigan aside. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah, Tommy Mancini talked to someone he shouldn't, or have talked to. And Albert Anastasia found out. What nobody knew yet, what would take Costigan 3 days to piece together, was that Tommy Mancini hadn't just talked. He'd stolen from the most dangerous man in Brooklyn, and what he'd stolen had nearly started a war between the 5 families. To understand what happened to Tommy Mancini, you need to understand who Albert Anastasia was in 1952. He wasn't just another mob boss. He was the chief executioner for Murder Incorporated, the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Between 1930 and 1940, Anastasia had personally ordered or carried out an estimated 500 murders. He controlled the Brooklyn waterfront with absolute authority. Every union, every shipping company, every warehouse paid tribute to Anastasia. By 1952, Anastasia's primary business wasn't murder anymore. It was smuggling, cigarettes, whiskey, heroin, anything that could come through the port of New York. The docks were perfect for it, thousands of crates. Moving through every day, customs inspectors on the payroll, longshoremen who knew to look the other way. On June 14, 1952, 3 days before Tommy Mancini's body was discovered, a Swedish cargo ship called the SS Margareta docked at Pier 7 in Brooklyn. The manifest listed machine parts, textiles, and furniture. What it didn't list was the 200 kilograms of pure heroin hidden in false-bottom crates marked as industrial sewing machines. The heroin belonged to Albert Anastasia. It was worth $4 million on the street, the largest single shipment to come through Brooklyn in 5 years. The plan was simple. Unload the margarita on the night shift, move the heroin crates to a warehouse on Columbia Street, cut and package it, then distribute it through Anastasia's network across New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Tommy Mancini was one of 12 longshoremen assigned to the margarita unloading crew. He'd worked for Anastasia's operation for 3 years. He knew which crates to handle, carefully. He knew which trucks to load them into. He knew to keep his mouth shut and his eyes down. Tommy had been reliable, invisible, exactly the kind of worker Anastasia preferred. But Tommy had a problem. His younger brother, Marco, had gotten into debt with a loan shark named Salvatore Carlucci. Carlucci worked for the Colombo family, one of the 5 families that shared power in New York, alongside Anastasia's Gambino family connections. Marco owed $8,000. Carlucci wanted it paid by the end of June, or Marco would end up in the East River wearing concrete shoes. Tommy didn't have $8,000. He made $85 a week on the docks, plus occasional bonuses when Anastasia's special shipments came through. He had maybe $400 in savings. His wife, Maria, was 7 months pregnant with their second child. There was no way to get that kind of money legitimately. That's when Tommy made the worst decision of his life. On June 15th, the night after the margarita docked, Tommy was working the Fonti graveyard shift. The heroin crates were being moved from the ship to the warehouse. Tommy was operating a forklift, moving crates from the dock to the waiting trucks. Around 1:30 a.m., when the shift supervisor stepped away to take a phone call, Tommy diverted one crate. Instead of loading it onto Anastasia's truck, he moved it to a different section of the warehouse behind a stack of legitimate cargo containers. He covered it with a tarp, marked it with chalk. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. That single crate contained 20 kilograms of pure heroin. Street value, approximately $400,000. Tommy's plan was to sell it to Salvatore Carlucci, pay off Marco's debt, and disappear with whatever money was left. June 16, 1952, 2 p.m. Tommy met Salvatore Carlucci at a coffee shop on Court Street in Carroll Gardens. Carlucci was 40, and if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. 35, thick-necked, with hands like concrete blocks and a reputation for breaking kneecaps when payments came late. He sat across from Tommy, stirring espresso with a tiny spoon that looked ridiculous in his massive fingers. "You got my money?" Carlucci asked. "Better," Tommy said. "I got something worth a lot more than $8,000. Tommy laid it out. One crate, 20 kilos of pure heroin, stolen from Albert Anastasia's shipment the night before. Carlucci's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me you stole from Anastasia?" "The man moves 100 crates a month. He won't miss one." "He misses everything, you idiot. That's why he's still alive." Carlucci leaned forward. "You know what happens to people who steal from Anastasia?" "I know what happens to my brother if I don't pay you $8,000. Tommy's voice was desperate now. "Look, I'm offering you $400,000 worth of product for $10,000. You pay off Marco's debt, give me $2,000 for my family, and you walk away with enough heroin to set up your own distribution. Tell me that's not worth the risk." Carlucci was quiet for a long moment. The truth was, he was tempted. $400,000 worth of heroin for $10,000 was the deal of a lifetime, and if he could move that product through Colombo family channels without Anastasia knowing where it came from, he'd be a made man within a year. "Where's the crate?" Carlucci asked. "Pier 7, Warehouse 3, behind the maritime equipment containers. I can get it loaded onto a truck tonight after the shift change. You better be sure about this, Tommy, because if Anastasia finds out, we're both dead. He won't find out. I'll be gone by tomorrow. Taking Maria and the kids to her sister's place in Philadelphia. You'll never see me again." Carlucci agreed. They shook hands. The meeting lasted 11 minutes, and every word of it was overheard by Jimmy the Gent Burke, one of Anastasia's most trusted enforcers, who happened to be sitting 2 booths away reading a newspaper. What Tommy didn't know was that Anastasia had already noticed the missing crate. A shipment that valuable didn't go uncounted. By noon on June 16th, Anastasia knew that one crate containing 20 kilos hadn't made it to the Columbia Street warehouse. He'd called a meeting with his dock supervisors. They'd reviewed the crew assignments. Tommy Mancini's name came up. The shift supervisor remembered Tommy operating the forklift during the critical window when the crate disappeared. Anastasia put Jimmy Burke on Tommy immediately. "Follow him, see who he talks to, find out where my merchandise is." Burke followed Tommy to the Court Street coffee shop, watched him meet with Carlucci, got close enough to hear the whole conversation. By 3:00 p.m., Burke was back at Anastasia's social club on Mulberry Street, reporting everything. Anastasia's response was cold and immediate. "Get the merchandise back, then get Tommy. I want everyone on those docks to see what happens when you steal from me." By midnight, Salvatore Carlucci was dead, shot 3 times in the back of the head in a warehouse in Red Hook. The heroin crate was recovered, and Tommy Mancini was being dragged from his apartment in Bensonhurst, screaming. They took Tommy to Pier 7. Not to kill him there, but to make an example of him there. The place where he'd worked, the place where he'd stolen, the place where every longshoreman in Brooklyn would see him at sunrise and understand the cost of betrayal. Albert Anastasia didn't come himself. He never did the wet work personally anymore. He sent 3 men, Jimmy Burke, Anthony Tony Clips Fioravanti, and a new enforcer named Joseph Joe the Barber, Barbara. They brought Tommy to the warehouse around 2 a.m. The pier was empty. The night shift had ended at midnight. The morning shift wouldn't arrive until 6 a.m. They had 4 hours. According to what Detective Costigan would later piece together from informants, they started by beating Tommy. Not to death, just enough to make him understand what was coming. Broken ribs, shattered nose, fractured jaw. Tommy begged, offered to give back money he didn't have, promised to leave New York forever. Said his wife was pregnant, his kids needed him. Jimmy Burke stuffed a handkerchief in Tommy's mouth to shut him up. "You should have thought about your kids before you stole from Mr. Anastasia." They nailed his left hand first, held him against the warehouse wall, while Tony Clips positioned a railroad spike against Tommy's palm. Joe the Barber swung the sledgehammer. It took 3 hits to drive the spike through flesh and bone into the wooden wall. Tommy's screaming was muffled by the handkerchief, but his body convulsed with each impact. Then the right hand, then both feet together, ankles crossed. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. 1 spike through both. The crucifixion positioning wasn't random. Anastasia had used it before. It was deliberate religious imagery twisted into a mafia message. You betrayed the family. This is your crucifixion. Tommy Mancini died around 4:30 a.m., bled out slowly, just as Anastasia intended. Before they left, Jimmy Burke pinned the ace of spades to Tommy's chest. The card meant death to informants, but in this case, it meant something more. It meant death to thieves. By 8 a.m., every longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront knew what happened. By noon, every mob-connected worker from Red Hook to Bay Ridge had heard the story. Tommy Mancini stole from Anastasia. Anastasia nailed him to a wall. The message was crystal clear. You can't steal from the Lord High Executioner and live. Detective Costigan closed the case as an unsolved homicide. He knew who did it. He knew why. But there were no witnesses willing to talk, no evidence that would hold up in court, and no appetite from the district attorney's office to go after Albert Anastasia over a dead dock worker with mob connections. Tommy Mancini was buried at Greenwood Cemetery on June 21, 1952. His wife Maria gave birth to their daughter 3 weeks later. She named the baby Grace, hoping for mercy her husband never received. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. She left Brooklyn the following month and never came back. Albert Anastasia continued controlling the waterfront until 1957, when he was shot to death in a barber's chair at the Park Sheraton Hotel. But that's another story. What happened to Tommy Mancini became legend on the docks. Old-timers still tell it. The sailor who stole the heroin and the sunrise that revealed his crucifixion. It's a story about loyalty, about consequences, about what happens when you take from men who take everything.